Hey everybody, this is Teresa Griffith and this is the Trek. And so we have SG Anon with us tonight, and we're going to ask him what we've been all asking, waiting to ask him for a long time. And as well as I have Mark Abrams with us tonight, who is, he was with Miracles Intel and has a long list of accolades. Is Meryl with you tonight, Mark?
I'm not sure if she got on or not.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm asking them to be with us to ask questions. They are my good friends and they are full of it. So Meryl and Mark have both done a lot of deep dives and have a lot of insight. And Meryl does a lot of my Gematria. And so, all right, awesome. So just chime in, Mark, at any time. And if Meryl comes on, same with her, you know, any kind of questions, you guys open your mics, but as for everyone else, just put it in the chat. All right, without further ado, I'm gonna welcome SG to our show tonight.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Oh, we're at such a pivotal time right now. We follow you every day, and we're so thankful to God for you. So we would really like you tonight to help do what you do, and that is to bring hope and encouragement to the hearts of the people about, you know, you're aware more than most people how weary the people are with the delays, and we do understand them. In this group, this is a really red-pilled group. We understand what's going on. We research on our own. I'm a dreamer. I've been given epic dreams that have come true during this war. And we understand the human trafficking aspect, although we'd rather stay away from that subject because there are people in our group who would not be able to sleep tonight, you know. So we have someone kind of that we're working with that we will be funding very soon now for human trafficking. She was trafficked and she's an expert in it. She trains police forces. And so we don't want to avoid the subject, but yet we'd rather not talk details about it. And so if you don't mind.
Understood.
Yeah. So is there any thing you'd like to open with before we start asking the questions?
You know, nothing in particular. This is the most exciting time for any of us to really be alive. You know, these things that are very, very evil, you know, unfortunately not all are completely under control yet, but we have made more progress as humanity in the last, we'll say 3 to 6 years, 3 to 7, 8 years, than at any point really in time in human history, with the exception of a couple moments throughout the medieval eras and way back into ancient times. So this really is the greatest time to be alive, despite the evil that we're up against, because we're aware of what exactly is going on. So we can read the playbook, we can watch the events unfolding, but we also understand that those events are dual realities now. We've never understood that before, but our entire lives were a movie. The things that we did, the things that we were sort of compelled into, the structures, the systems, we were sort of herded about, if you will, given just enough free choice to be satiated and happy, but not really, you know, not really advancing the cause for the human being, if you will. That has all changed now. This is the greatest time to be alive.
It is. It so is. And so our questions are going to be pertinent to the end game, you know. Mark, do you want to start out with yours?
Sure. And I'll actually start out with the second question that I sent in. SG, pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise,
Absolute
sir. Thank you.
This has traveled a long way, and we're approaching the end game now. One of the questions I've had from the get-go is, how do you go about changing human nature? Okay, we're heading for the biggest fiscal, technological, and ethical change in human history, yet many awake people are still completely focused on self-importance and self-enrichment. So how do you quell the greed, the power lust that is human nature and endangers, really, truly endangers the path forward?
That might be the best question that anyone has ever asked me, because it's really, it captures in such majestic sensibility what we're going through and why it had to be this way. But we are prideful creatures, and that's not always a bad thing. But when we're talking about realigning human understanding of ourselves, human understanding of one another, and how our societies are really supposed to work together and intertwine, that is a process that does not happen easily, if at all. And throughout history, unfortunately, we tend to respond most effectively to pain. That goes all the way back to the Sinai Desert, the sojourn for 40 years with the children of Israel. So how do we change human nature? Well, we have to get inside of it. We have to arrive at a place where individuals are affected by what is very important to them personally. Maybe even not shared between them and their spouse, but something that about their life, a concept, an identification that they have with this life experience. It has to impact them in such a way that they want to change. And the first step in changing is understanding that there is in fact a need to change, and that process is compelled through curiosity. So you're asking, how do we change human nature? Well, we show them exactly what's going on, but we allow people to live it. We allow people to experience it. Sort of like how General Eisenhower marched the peoples of Nazi Germany in those towns through the Buchenwald concentration camp and others, physically showing them as a result of them falling asleep at the wheel. Now, we can go back and we can discuss the history, and we can discuss the coercion, and we can discuss the levers of power and the justifiability of it and the right and the wrong. And we'll probably do that for many centuries beyond these times that we're currently living right now. But the path that we're on has been extraordinarily effective. We have all areas of society, pop culture, music, entertainment, the Hollywood segment scene, country music stars, business moguls, titans, tech titans, Elon Musk being a good example, I think, in some respects. We're converting all of society's information driving apparatus, the narrative that they use, the apparatus that they use to drive these narratives, all of the way down to programming from middle school and high school children with music and songs, into the academic space where we program people differently, playing off of these fears that we've created, these subconscious fears that get created in our beings as a result of the things we consume. We've taken all of that back, or we are, I should say, taking all of that back. And as far as the narrative, that's the other part of this awakening. Everyone who's still asleep is hearing the parrot ear, or is hearing the parrot in their ear on one side, and is now realizing on the other side that what the parrot is saying is true. That in and of itself is very compelling, and it causes very stubborn individuals, even if they do it to themselves at night alone in their bedroom, to begin to question what's really going on with their reality. When people begin to question very seriously and very genuinely at a soul level, change is happening. That is the spirit working on us, forcing us to evaluate new options, to seek out a greater understanding. In other words, to expand. And that's exactly what we're going through.
Yeah, I want to comment on that, but I have to switch internets real fast. Hang on. All right. Okay, we back? Okay. So I have this internet problem where it will switch over into a very slow one, and I wanted to make sure that that's not affecting our connection. But what I wanted to say was, don't you think that after the 10 days of disclosure, when the normies are forced to wake up, that there will be a huge attitude adjustment, because there will be like a humility that cannot be denied, where people will so question themselves. There won't be, I don't think there'll be such a temptation to pride, because it will be like, oh my gosh, why did you know and I didn't know?
Absolutely.
How could I
And
be so
humili-
blind?
Correct. And that embarrassment is a driver in, you know, what Mark was talking about just a moment ago with real human change. Being forced to accept on its face in a very non-evasive, direct way that you were astoundingly wrong is actually good for the soul. It provides us a return to some grace. It provides us a return to a higher, a more resonant place spiritually, because we're less resistant. We're not fighting things, including this image that we've created of ourselves. So that is coming for the normies. And I think it's going to be one of the singular largest humbling moments for all of mankind, when mankind collectively realizes in a very rapid fashion that the very institutions that they have trusted, funded, in many cases worked in and been a part of most of their lives, sought to eliminate them as though we were a problem here in this world, because that's how this complex has always seen us. And that is a reality that's really very harsh for people to understand, you know, for people to grasp and understand. And it is, unfortunately, that level of evil and corruption is why this does take so long and why it is so delicate. We have the physical kinetic things happening in the background, which are another factor and one of the main driving factors for timelines. But the waking up process itself has to be original and has to be organic, unfortunately, to last and to create a generational impression so we can safeguard this world forever. This will be something that mankind will never forget. And the moment you were just describing is absolutely coming.
Any more, Mark? Did you have another one?
Oh, I can keep going.
Okay.
Oh, Meryl's got one.
Good evening, SG Anon. How are you?
Blessed, my friend. How are you?
I'm very good. My question is towards the Gematria end of it, because I'm trying to uncover for myself and trying to wake others up through the disclosure through Gematria of figuring out phrases and wordings and not taking what we're hearing and living in a literal sense right now. And through that, I've uncovered a lot through Gematria as far as phrases in putting those in and seeing what is being uncovered. I all of a sudden realized that taking the number, the numerical aspect of the Gematria, and relating it or try to relate it to the Q post or the Q drop leads to a whole new disclosure of information. I was wondering, is there any direction you can kind of give a layman like me in fine tuning that uncovering so I can help others through the Gematria in waking people up rather than talking about what we're seeing in the literal sense?
You know, the very best direction I could give you, my friend, would be to follow what your intuition is telling you, because you're on to something in a really big and very powerful way. Trump uses Gematria all of the time. Gematria was used by various Anons throughout the Q boards when those were first, you know, coming about, when they were originating in their, you know, their first sense. And we see a lot of that even still now. When it comes to decoding and things like that, I really tell people, hone in on what you feel pulled to, because that's where your spirit is trying to direct you. And that's what this awakening process is really all about. With Trump in particular, or Dan Scavino or other people like that, I typically search Gematria on phrases that I don't hear them use very often, or misspellings that are so overtly intentional there can't be any other reason except to provide some sort of misdirection or hint. A lot of times you find some really fascinating things approaching it that way. And what's really important, I think, regardless of which avenue you're using, is if you're reaching people in an esoteric sense and getting them to think outside of the box, getting them to break the mold of how we've always been taught to see the world and feel the world, or even just getting them to understand that there are other ways in which we can communicate. They are important. Symbolism is real. You know, things of this nature, the things we do impact the spiritual world. That's really the biggest part of the awakening. So, you know, I know that that's not a super long answer, but if you're honed in on what you feel very passionate and pulled towards, that's very important, because that's your inner spirit directing you.
Thank you so much.
All right. So you have another one, Mark?
Sure. This one is really near and dear to my heart. I don't know if Tracy had informed you of my background. but you know, and I don't think you're old enough to remember the old shake and bake commercial with the little kid at the end going, and I have, I spent 46 years in the fake news business, 43
Oh
of them
my.
with A. Oh yeah, but it gets better because I spent 43 of them with ABC News in New York. So, you know, you're talking libtard central, news
My
central.
thoughts with you, sir.
So it's been a rough road to hoe, and a lot of friends lost and this and that and the other because of the absolute intolerance of the way that the government and the media loudspeaker has forced the direction. So basically, with an auspiciously important weekend coming up with the Super Bowl, if it was ever poignant for Patriots to take a shot at the powers that be, why aren't they boycotting the game, the network, the NFL, and the sponsors? They don't need picket lines. They don't need banners. They don't need tickets. Just shut the TV off. It's as simple as that. Shut the TV off. Don't watch the game. Play with your kids. Have a staycation. When the opportunity presents itself to hurt these people in their pockets, with all of the biggest patriots out there on mainstream media and on alternative media, they're all talking about their Super Bowl parties and watching the game. We're sending the wrong message. I always go back to the Eddie Murphy line from Trading Places. What's the best way to hurt rich people? Make them poor people. And this is the type of thing that we used to do anytime we had contract negotiations. You threaten to walk out on the biggest occasions, because then it costs the company money to have people on standby and people ready and this and that and the other. And people have this opportunity now, and going right through spring training, right into the hockey and basketball playoffs. Don't patronize these people who have gone out of their way to rub in our faces how they really don't give a damn about this country.
You know, it's worth highlighting at the very outset here that I'm actually of the same opinion, and we don't patronize in our household. We don't feed the beast, and that's a personal thing on our end. But to your question, you know, I don't know as I'm really qualified to answer it, but I've got a couple of interesting ideas. You know, at this point in the game, we have control of a significant amount of media, and we also have control of certain sporting events. I think we've actually seen some showboatmanship going on in the athletic space designed to wake the sleepers up. Things that are just very dreadfully obvious, and they're getting so much attention all at once that it can't help but sort of stir that spirit. So I think that's part of it. Another part of it, I think, is a lot of people still don't necessarily equate what they're doing in the literal sense that they're supporting these things. We have this sort of notion, this disconnect, cognitive dissonance, if you will, especially here in the United States, that, you know, that's a very big problem. It's very important. It's very upsetting. But if it concerns me directly, I'm not going to worry about it. And I think we're seeing some of that too. And that's, again, part of what this awakening process is for, because it will drive home eventually to those individuals that they do have to take this seriously, and that getting actively involved at some measure, and financial is the best and most accessible way to do that, is really very important. My third and final thought on it, my friend, is I think a lot of people are choosing to recognize these events that go on in our culture as times to come together with family and sort of spread that loving spirit and enhance that resonant energy in the world. And they are sort of not going to let anything evil steal that from them, which is an admirable point of view, and certainly a high-flying spiritual attitude to take. But it sort of disempowers it when we patronize, right? And we participate, where we re-participate back into these things. You know, so again, maybe not fully qualified to answer the question. I think there's a lot of things at play. I can assure you that when it goes mainstream, that the NFL is the second largest child trafficking event in the United States, second only to Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby. That will shut off most Patriots televisions just right then and there.
Interesting. Tress, you want to go?
Yeah. So, I mentioned to you that we have an advisor, a very high level advisor who gives us intel from the DoD, from the U.S. Treasury in Mar-a-Lago. And we've been told that the top cabal have been taken out. The second string, if you will, have been taken down. I'm wondering if you have seen evidence of that fact on the deep web. Do you bump into things that show you, that prove to you where we're at with that?
I have a photograph in my possession, and I have put it into a photo editor to check out the pixelated layers, and they all check out. It is a photograph of Hillary Rodham Clinton post-execution. So I can assure you that the top members and that second string lower level executive command, they have all been worked over. The individuals we're seeing now are either in submission with an implanted kill switch, or they are a body double, and the original one was simply too evil to keep around. That is part of this movie, right? We can all look at Joe Biden, for example, and see that that is not Joe Biden.
Right.
It's sort of, at this point, it's a joke really in the Patriot community. Even a lot of the more mainstream Patriots and some of the bigger Patriot names are starting to come around to who in the heck is this guy? So yes, I can absolutely confirm that that is true.
So, everybody was all upset when Kevin McCarthy got in and how he got in and all of that, but he definitely controlled by the white hats and is doing a great job with what he's been asked or told to do. So do you think that he's a double or just cooperating now?
I've seen a lot of people go to the mattresses about these doubles, and it's important to wind ourselves back as well and appreciate that a lot of these individuals were just mules, but they were the elected mules. They were the elected class mules, but mules nonetheless. And when you go to a mule and say that you can essentially comply or you can die for the stallion over here, the mules choose to save themselves every time, and that's exactly what we've seen going on. I don't believe McCarthy is a double. I've seen some interesting photos, but the photos are from different angles, and key identifying factors like the ears and teeth seem to be the same. But I have absolutely no doubt that the man is in submission. He had a long Eric Swalwell style track record with a Chinese spy and multiple affairs outside of his married life. So that in and of itself provides a national security risk assessment. But the other thing is, during that entire process, we saw such incredible confirmations. I mean, we were getting Q proofs in real time of what was really going on here. Marjorie Taylor Greene in a photograph at just the perfect angle to show that on her phone was an individual with the initials DT. We had Matt Gaetz nominating Donald Trump for Speaker of the House. We had all of this pomp and circumstance and this political drama. And then in the wee morning hours of January the 7th, at the 15th vote, Kevin McCarthy becomes Speaker of the House of Representatives, which lined up perfectly to a 5-year delta to a Q drop, discussing a good win with 15 in brackets. We are absolutely decimating them. We've taken a lot of the key areas of society, and that's what's allowing us to wage this total war. And it's also what's forcing them. It's what's causing them to make such disastrous counter moves. They've never been in this position before. They have been militarily threatened by us before, but we've never had the narrative and the control of information and understanding on our side. And that was always how they managed to weasel their way out, escape, and start over and start again. This is the first time in history that this has ever happened for these people, and they don't know what to do.
Yeah. How much of the media do you think we've taken over and are controlled?
40% at this point.
Yeah. Because I know our advisor says that they do deliver messages for us from time to time, not on the level that they will soon. Here's a kind of a humorous question. As we were watching the State of the Union pretend address, many of our members noticed the woman in the yellow canary dress. Was that supposed to be a comm, do you think?
I believe it was, yes.
And what's
So,
your,
and we had several comms throughout that speech. You know, I don't have a particular dial in on that particular comm, but we had such overt instances throughout that address, which we could see very plainly. A part of that was actually pre-recorded and pre-filmed. So this is a, you know, this sort of highlights, pardon me. This sort of highlights the complexity of this military operation we have going on. And let's be honest, folks, they didn't even attempt to hide their masks. I mean, we had so many pictures flood the internet during the speech. It was, the address wasn't even over, discussing the masks, the toupees coming off, the earlobes not lining up on multiple people. It was like a low budget film. And so at this point, I think we're seeing in certain areas, we're forcing the deep state into extraordinary embarrassment and shame, right? But again, part of why we're still here is because we have other operations in different areas that are not fully concluded. And so the show must go on.
Yeah. What you got, Mark?
SG, January 20th, 2021. Do you have any idea who was overall in control of the quote unquote inauguration? In other words, was this something that was planned and put out there by the white hats? Was it a black hat operation? And there's a specific direction that I'm looking for on this.
It's my understanding that the inauguration of Joseph R. Biden was the funeral pyre for the deep state. That inauguration was a regulation military funeral.
Yeah.
That inauguration happened under a clear show of force military occupancy. That inauguration happened on the tail end of several executive orders targeting American national security, American cybersecurity, and then with an EO that had been active since the early part of 2020. I believe it was May of 2020, might have been April, calling up 1 million National Guard soldiers to active duty status and placing them on 24-month rotating duty rosters, if you will. So I believe that the inauguration that we saw that day, and by the way, that inauguration happened completely out of regulation at almost every possible facet. The swearing in was before. We had different sort of lines of sequence and statements and things like that that were completely off base, totally out of tradition. I think even the Bible was upside down at the inauguration. I forget, but I think that was out there as well. So it's my understanding that that entire event was part of this military continuity of government operation to keep the mass consciousness and the continuity of the country and our national essential functions all working and going together, but sort of sending a very clear and powerful message of who's really in charge here in the United States.
Okay, the reason I asked is because Merrill immediately noticed that day that not only were the times off, but for whatever reason, OAN was the only station that wasn't carrying it. So I happen to have the same editing software at home that I had when I was at work, and took the feed and put it in the computer and watched as the entire ceremony was really, really, really poorly edited. It was not live.
Incredible.
First of all, because I have friends who went down there and they had the media a good half a mile to a mile down Constitution Avenue away from the Capitol. And it was a miserable day. It was chilly. It was dreary. It was snowing a little bit. And yet everything was bright and gay at the Capitol. And then the biggest kickers it came through basically after Gaga sang the national anthem, which was about, I guess it ended about 6 to 7 minutes in. And she sings the anthem, gets finished, goes over to Biden's side, congratulates him, crosses the aisle over to Kamala's side. Now they had, if you remember, these bridge chairs set up in kind of a tight formation where people could sit in the bridge chairs, but you weren't standing in between rows. It was a physical impossibility. And they cut over to that side, and you can clearly remember all the people who were sitting there, et cetera, and people on both sides were appearing and disappearing. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, standing in between two of the rows was Big Mike. And then they cut back to Gaga, and then they cut back again, and there's Barry and Big Mike. And he's standing there waving like this, and she literally walked right through them.
Incredible.
Then they cut away from that. Oh, it was mind-boggling. And then after that, they cut away again and come back, and all of a sudden, Big Mike and Barry are Laura and Dopey. Where did they come from? You know, and when you spend that many years in the business and you look and you go, wow, you know, this is an important, even if you're trying to pull something over on somebody, do a good job of it. But it was phenomenally embarrassing. So that was why I asked specifically who was in control of that.
That is incredible. And I had heard similar stories like that, but none quite that detailed. But you could see all through that entire, production that we had these inconsistencies that just did not add up. You could tell that it wasn't congruous, and you didn't really need like a filmography background, if you will, to understand that. You just had to really be paying attention. And I think that's sort of the essence of everything that we've seen, right? This was poorly done on purpose. This was poorly done to awaken the aware patriots out there, the ones with an eye to see, if you will, and a very curious mind and willing to take that internal leap of faith, if you will, and go down the rabbit hole. And it has proven to be one of the most incredible circumstances that we've ever experienced singularly as mankind in the history of the world. I would argue with just about anyone that outside of walking with the Christ, this is the most important time in history to be alive.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely incredible, my friend. That's a cool story.
It was incredible to watch. I could tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, also backing up on what Tressie had asked you before, because it's a good follow-up to that. Going from the understanding that the white hats are in control, and please God, let that be so. How do we quell the anger of other fully awake patriots who, while knowing that we're in a war, and there are always casualties in war, they also totally comprehend that all the bad things we've been seeing and experiencing, all of the losses we've sustained of life, liberty, and personal property, and ultimately knowing that these things are being perpetrated on us by the alleged good guys. How do we maintain our ranks knowing this as they continue to kick the can down the road?
And that is the great question of our time right now. It's really interesting. We've had this sort of confidence building momentum in our movement, certainly since 2020, discussing how we had it all. We had a lot of things under control. The top echelons were taken out, things like that. I think one of the things that was missed, and really one of the things that may have motivated my mentor and I to have the discussions we did in early 2022, was that while we had control of key sectors only accounted for around 15 to 20% of the overall matrix itself. So as we went forward out of the 2020 election and into continuity of government here in the United States of America, and in many nations around the world as a result of the COVID crime and their complicity and just how deep that really goes, we've been taking back essentially 75% of the earth from that point forward. A good example of this just recently, the earthquakes in Turkey. I've been doing some really heavy research on that. And what I'm increasingly seeing coming from the research I'm finding is that it looks like there was a back and forth I'm checking the timestamps of these earthquakes being recorded, and we have a sequence of earthquakes at exactly 10 kilometers for several minutes, 7, 8, 9 minutes long. And then there's a delay, and then about 5 to 7 minutes later, we have an extreme earthquake event about 8 kilometers below that, which would, of course, dislodge everything above that level. I've had videos sent to me where we have these buildings that are supposedly coming down in these earthquakes. They're coming down in their footprints, exactly like 9/11. This doesn't look to be a situation where the earth is shaking hard enough to topple these 4 and 5 and 6-story buildings. So as we've gone through this process post 2020, one of the reasons we had continuity of government here in the United States was that we needed to control certain elements of the United States military, and especially the arsenal that it has available to it. Because we had to proceed with a very irregular, very special operations warfare scenario to get the rest of this matrix sort of under control. And we needed cross-societal allies to do that, not the least of which being the digital army. So, you know, I guess what I would say is, as I followed the movement, I realized pretty early on that while we had incredible amounts of optimism, confidence, hope, assuredness at the beginning, and we had of course, you know, we were riding on the coattails of having witnessed the stolen election. A lot of us very catalyzed, you know, over that, and sort of momentous and active and ready to move forward. One of the things that got lost in translation was just how big of an enemy we still had left. It's my understanding that we're over 600,000 sealed indictments now all around the world. And to get the entire network of individuals all of the way down to the local communities is in the tens of millions. So I don't think that process takes a long time. Let me highlight that, because as we go through the continual drop down of the house of cards from the top, we're going to see a lot of that category of individual that I was just discussing, the local community corruption. They're going to throw themselves on our side and come willingly over. But I know that's a long answer to the question, but I think that's how we highlight what we're going through as patriots, is we come to appreciate that in some respects we were a little bit more overzealous and overconfident, and that's actually a good thing, because it's compelled us into this hardened, awakened state that is irreversible now.
Your mouth to God's ears.
So I believe it was about a year ago that there was a lot of happenings at the White House at night, light shows, and I took tons of footage, video footage and pictures of these wild lights that were, I mean, it was sci-fi. It looked like spider webs, and they moved, and it had nothing to do with camera lenses and moisture or anything like that. Do you have any take on that?
No, I'll be honest with you, Miss Griffith, I don't. That's actually a new one to me. I've heard about the different lighting events at the White House, and I've seen some video evidence of a couple of them, but none like the ones you just described. I'd be interested to take a look.
We watched it on the TREK together, and it's like, wow, 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 can you believe what's going on? And it seemed like the community, the intel community, was silent. Like, are we the only ones seeing it? Did we just bump into this? You know, it was absolutely wild. And then, of course, about that same time was when some of the executions were happening inside the White House.
Correct. And we know that that's been occurring. We have multiple, you know, instances of video evidence, both from light flashes within the White House, and then black bags and bodies, and you know, hearses moving off of the lawn, things like that. You know, that's been amply established, right? You know, but again, I'd be very interested to see what those light shows were about. My instincts tell me that it has something to do with their symbolism.
Really? Well, we saw what it appeared to be white hat personnel on the roof doing something. And then after that is when it happened. And there was a red ball in the sky like a moon, but it was always in the same spot. It was full, you know, round. And it was red, and there were these orbs that would come out of that red moon, and it would travel down to the Washington Monument in the middle of the monument every time, go inside, and then come back out, go down to the Lincoln Memorial, and then shoot back up real fast.
Incredible.
Yeah, and we were wondering, is it something that is weakening the monument to take it down? And then not long after that, a 107 had some kind of a graphic picture that showed lightning hitting right at that spot.
Well, that's actually what I was about to comment on. It could have very well been an energetic, like a quantum frequency preparatory maneuver. And those types of events are relatively easy to manipulate. The technology that they've suppressed from us, you know, we could spend probably 3 to 5 hours just talking about that alone. We are more than 500 years much more advanced with currently developed tech. But most of that tech resides deep within the intelligence community, the weapons caches, storehouses, things of that nature, and different secret bases throughout the world, which a lot of that we've been reclaiming, but not all of that has been finished yet. You know, that's an absolutely incredible story right there. I've heard about that video, but again, to have it in such a described detail is wonderful. The Washington Monument itself is a frequency weapon. You know, it is able to emanate very harmful bandwidths very harmful frequency wavelengths at high intensity levels. And so that could have been an angle on that as well. I think that might be something I'll look up.
And I can send you those videos. I have so many videos. We watched hours of it taking place. So, I mean, really wild things.
Teresa, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I actually felt like that night that we were watching that for hours, that there was a portal and that was demonic activity. And then I heard a prophet say the same thing, and I can't remember whether it was Johnny Enlow.
No, it wasn't. No, it was Robin, and I disagreed. I felt that it was the White Hats, that they were dismantling the demonic at the White House. That's what I felt at the time. So yeah, I disagreed with Robin at that time. My sister and I watched, there was, you know, there's this statue out in front. It's got a horse. I don't know if it has a rider or not. But I don't know if anybody on the trek was on live with me when we watched that. But there were men standing all around that thing, and they took some kind of a saber, a lightsaber, and they penetrated that thing, and it went bright light, like it exploded with light. And I think we have that video. So I'm not saying it's not demonic, but Christians always go there. And I felt like because my sister and I saw we felt it was the White Hats, because they were in control of the White House, on the top doing something, preparing something. And then after that was this incredible light show. And I felt weakening the Washington Monument, but time will tell. But I'd love to send you all those videos and pictures that I have.
SG, I don't want to bait you into that 4 or 5 hour discussion about technology, but coming from the side of an engineer and talking about 9/11, while I can 1 billion% stake my life on the fact, telling anybody that at Shanksville there was no plane, at the Pentagon there was no plane, that buildings 1, 2, and 7 in New York were imploded. There's no doubt about that. I've covered enough implosions, and it's not just a matter of the means by which they implode the building, but the aftermath and how the cloud develops and then envelops the area. The one thing I've had trouble with accepting is that we had enough advanced technology in the form of Operation Bluebeam to create sight and sound to make people actually see the planes go into the building. And I had the video that day, especially of the South Tower being hit, and the sound of the plane's engine revving up to full throttle just before it slammed into the building was something I'll never forget so long as I live. Are we that advanced?
You know, my friend, we are. Project Bluebeam is several hundred years ahead of its time in terms of creating elusive mechanisms within this quantum field, because our bodies and our spiritual, what I describe as our spiritual bodies is really more accurately described as our electrochemical nature. It is the part of us that enables multi-dimensional connectivity with different portions of our universe and our world. We have the ability to affect our electrochemical field with our thoughts. We also affect it with all of the other things we do in our life. That field, if properly manipulated, can give us feedback that we interpret to be bona fide reality. And that is what Project Bluebeam is actually able to manipulate. It manipulates the quantum resonant frequencies to provide essentially an image created in the very atomic space in which you are witnessing or seeing, and everything that is, and everything that is associated with that image. It's interesting. We have videos that circulate online that seem very credible, that have no aircraft in them at all, from ground level, showing simply just an explosion. But we have other videos, again, extremely credible, complete with, like you said, the sound effects, the ambient noise, the thermal imaging, things that our eyes would recognize and pick up on, that sort of suggests to us that this also is the reality. The truth of the matter is we have the technology available to us as a civilization all around the world to create whichever reality we wish to create. They're sort of giving us a soft rollout of that in virtual reality. And that particular avenue of what we have just available to us in the open marketplace right now at the public level has already been tied back in one study to fatal brain damage. It's that real. The brain thinks the events of that particular beholding are actually the events that are occurring. I know that's a long answer, but it's a fascinating topic. Project Bluebeam is one of the most advanced technologies that's in the DARPA arsenal.
Wow.
See, and now how do you go, especially in Libtard Central, how do you go and explain that to the people without that in and of itself causing mass rioting?
Tommy Lee Jones did it in a movie once. I think it was Men in Black. Grab a tabloid and a pair of sunglasses and embrace the suck.
SG, the answer is so clear if you are in tune to the media, because throughout this whole disaster and tragedy of 9/11, to this day, we will only see one angle shot of those planes hitting. And we were living in a time where there were cell phones and people were taking pictures. And yet the only thing we see is that plane in the same shot with the same narrative. And they have never revisited any of the tragedy from Las Vegas or from 9/11. They never followed up with it. And coincidentally, they can't seem to come up with a narrative to explain to especially New Yorkers who lived through this, that what they saw may not be what was. Because it was so clear immediately just in watching the media cover this. And if you turned on every single channel, everybody had the exact same picture, the exact same wording, and there was nothing different. It was like the word of the day today is X, and everybody followed down that. And it's just amazing. And I think that if people would really start paying attention and seeing and listening carefully to the news, the truth is right there. They're not hiding it. And we're so conditioned to go towards the right If we would just stay in the middle, I think we would see so much clearer.
That's a great commentary. And actually that sort of highlights again why this operation had to be done in the fashion it has been done. For the American public to accept that their government, in partnership with a foreign, actually several foreign intelligence agencies, to include the MI6 and the Israeli Mossad, carried out a false flag attack that resulted in the deaths of more than, I think it was 3,500 people, as well as several distinguished members of our military intelligence community, and that a foreign nation was allowed to shoot a missile into the Pentagon, the Department of Defense of the United States of America, from within American territorial waters and get off scot-free and get away. That particular level of awakening is going to be difficult for people to intake. And so very significant levels of awakening sort of have to predate that before we can arrive to that. We don't want to re-traumatize the nation, because that encourages MK Ultra again. That encourages us to fall back into that fear-based reactivity. But at the same time, we do have to provide enough of a jolt to get people fully awake. So yes, I think that, you know, that's a great commentary. And as we go forward, that and several other factors, are going to be, are going to be uniting in ways that we've not seen here in the United States in a very, very long time.
So they talk about the scare event and the near-death experience. Do you have an opinion about how soon that is or what that's going to be? And do you think it will it could result in loss of many lives?
You know, it's worth highlighting that it could result in an actual loss of many lives, or it could result in sort of a fantasy loss of many lives because of the capability of the mainstream media, even now, to CGI and create its own alternate reality. And they have, you know, they have this complex down very pat. They're lockstep and very good at what they do. So, but regarding, you know, when it comes, I think it comes this year. We have too many events that are pointing us already. I mean, we're only 5 weeks into the year, folks. We have too many events that are pointing us at incredible levels of declass and disclosure that are happening despite all of the efforts of the deep state to stop it. We've had overwhelming attention brought to the World Economic Forum and the agenda of the World Economic Forum. We officially now have died suddenly and Pfizer lied people died on trending on Twitter multiple times a week. Twitter being one of the largest social media outlets on earth, and access to, you know, essentially instant access to dignitaries, businessmen, industry titans, moguls, governmental officials, things like this, military personnel, both active and retired. So, you know, as we go forth through this process, I don't think that a scare event can be too far away. I think it has to come this year, likely in the first 6 to 8 months of this year. And legitimately, I think we see several small scale events happen that are sort of noticeable enough even to the sleepers that, oh, that's something's really off about that. That seems, it seems weird, or that seems inconsistent. I think we see that happen multiple times leading up to a fever pitch event. And we could be seeing the setup for something like that now. These Chinese balloons, I just reported on File 39, but these Chinese balloons weren't Chinese at all. These were American DARPA manufactured balloons, launched from, I believe, in international waters and launched over the United States. But they were carrying weapon systems, likely EMP based systems, or low yield jamming equipment and things like that for nuclear codes and sort of that level of electronic intelligence gathering, if you will, and manipulation. And that was allowed to go all through the United States. But that one particular balloon is one of like 4. And we have multiples over Mexico, South America, the Caribbean Basin, Africa. This is a multifaceted thing that's going on right now that's coming into the narrative space. And so I think that could be, I know that is a setup for something. I don't know what, but I know that it is a setup for something. We don't see this sort of alt media narrative break into the space at the same time that the mainstream narrative is breaking into the same space with a different story without something going on.
Do you feel that that both sides are controlling the weather?
I do. I believe that we still have HARP weapons that we have to get control of. I believe one of those weapons was actually used to interfere with these white hat operations in Turkey recently and caused such a massive loss of life.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and on that same thought about the military, how compromises the military, we have one of our members saying, my son is in Air Force intel, and he thinks that I'm a total conspiracy theorist. How can he not know what's going on? And do we still have two militaries in play?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, this pedophilia, financial corruption, and this dark occult religion are not limited in any form to just the civilian sector. A number of very prominent Nazis and Satanists made the heads of NATO at different points along the way. And then different corrupt US government administrations and Congresses and things like that have allowed for this bridge of corruption to happen into our military. It's actually one of the slow bleed techniques that we've been exposed to for essentially more than the last 60 years at this point. With regards to how many, that would be just pure speculation on my end. I would think at this point we're dealing with anywhere from 30 to 40% of flag officers, but not at the general levels, could be compromised. Again, this is not a commentary on the military. I really want to highlight that I have the utmost respect for our armed forces. We wouldn't be at this point where we're at as a world were it not for the U.S. military. But part of that operation is to highlight those traitors and those saboteurs within the ranks. And we're seeing a number of operations going on, pointing us to very interesting comms. We had an operation between U.S. Armed Forces and the Israeli Defense Force in the Mediterranean called Operation Juniper Oak. The juniper tree is a self-pruning tree. So that operation, and of course that operation had the aircraft carrier of the George H.W. Bush, which is, which is great symbolism there. So it seems to me that we were performing that operation to highlight inconsistencies or areas of opportunity that we need to improve upon before we move to next phases, but also to highlight who's going to be a problem actor going forward. And I think we're seeing that here in the United States as well at different levels. And in answer to the compartmentalization question, compartmentalization for a military operation of this magnitude would likely be at the highest level of command and control only. And whichever dictate that they send down the chain could involve, potentially no more than 7 to 15 different individuals. We could have a very expansive operation going with just their cooperation. The U.S. military is very streamlined and flexible. It's an extremely adaptive fighting force, and that includes how the politics and the chain of information is played within the military. We know that Trump was inaugurated with military intelligence and JAG officers behind him. That's a significant communication right then and there that what was really going on in the world was a transition through the Trump presidency into a period of military power with a public facing presidential figure, if you will, to sort of be the front face of what was already a continuity of government in the making operation, which transitioned to a full continuity of government operation in November of 2020, in that period between then and January of 2021. This is an incredible time to be alive. And I tell people, especially those that were in the military, don't underestimate what the U.S. military is truly capable of. Don't think for a moment that the U.S. military is not able to adapt its functionality to meet this sort of irregular warfare situation and ensure that no leaks, no information, no compromise at any level happens. And the ability of individuals within our military to meet their oath and keep their brothers in the dark with the most loving smile and the biggest embrace possible is really how this operation succeeds.
All right, we have some questions. We were told that when Trump was first elected, the first thing he did was to remove the chemtrail danger and replace it with something that would help kill the biological warfare outbursts. And but then people are still saying that they're noticing that in their states that when it's called for a sunny day, it's suddenly cloudy, like they're trying to block the sun so people can't get vitamin C. So do you think, what do you think about that, the chemtrails now?
I think both are true, and I'll tell you why. As we went through the Donald Trump presidency, we had the commander in chief with a very plain chain of command down through the departments and all the individuals in the right places to ensure that the correct will of the people got done. But as we went into continuity of government, a great deal of allowances had to be made. Authority in name only, if you will, and image only being returned to the Pentagon and other forms and fashions, and individuals being allowed to sort of make their own command and control decisions at their respective rank of authority in order to highlight who was really on our side and who was not. And of course, we have these orders coming down from an installed Manchurian government. So I think we've experienced both. I think we've experienced the good trailing. I think the Biden Manchurian regime and complicit military traitors within our ranks all throughout the U.S. military forces proceeded forward with the deep state plans that they were always sort of used to and in routines for anyway. And I think we're going to see a corrective action taken certainly before all of this is over. At some point, we will have the military in control for an interim period of time because they'll have to be. I believe shortly after that, or even concurrently with that, we see something happen with the 2020 election and the return of Donald J. Trump. And when that happens, I think the chemtrailing stops totally at that point. But between now and that point, it's important to sort of observe what happens in the environment. If you see trails in the air one day, and then for the next 3 days, plant life seems subdued, there's your answer. If you see them in the sky on a particular day, and the next day the plants seem extremely vibrant and full of life, or maybe the air is crisper or clearer, again, there's your answer. This is part of this highlighting of what our weaknesses and our areas of concern are before we really go forward and drop the hammer, because there are hammer options that are available to the President of the United States, which, according to his own words, nobody knows about.
We were also told that early on, well, I guess it was actually during the shutdown during COVID, that President Trump had the 5G brought down, especially in the schools, because it was going to be part of the mass death with the vaccines. So what's your take on that?
My take on, excuse me, the vaccines, pardon me, I got some water in my throat the wrong way. Excuse me. My take on the vaccines and, what may have been going on with the 5G and things like that are that the de-weaponization happened first because it provided, or excuse me, it posed the largest and most serious threat to humanity in terms of mass casualty events. 5G at one point was highly weaponized and able to penetrate directly into red blood cells and essentially shred them in real time. So this was de-weaponized, but it's my understanding that part of Operation Warp Speed was to gear antidotes to these sorts of frequency-based cellular modification weapons and turn those frequencies good. You can retune 5G. 5G is not a frequency. 5G is an intensity. So it can be retuned to the levels that it needs to be to encourage cellular healing. And all of a sudden, the death shot weapons become life shot weapons. Now, whether or not we see it play out in that form or fashion, I think is anybody's guess at this point. And I'll say this, I've been doing some digging recently, and I've got a couple of friends of mine here that are good researchers, not necessarily involved in the movement, but proximally involved with individuals that are tied to exposing this extermination agenda. And those individuals believe that President Trump was in fact in the dark more than he let on about what was really going on with the shots and what was really happening in the back end of Operation Warp Speed. Again, highlighting these traitors in our military versus our good military. I choose to believe this report because this individual that I spoke with is extremely trustworthy to me. But that seems extremely fantastical for most of the awakened patriots out there that someone like President Trump would not be aware. So it's my belief that we have to have something in play, probably emerging from Warp Speed, to reverse the damage that these things have done to the human race. else we're headed for sort of a mass extinction event, if you will, not an extinction event, but a mass die-off event. And I don't think that we're prepared to stomach that as a civilization, because that would tank us and send us backwards. I think we have to avoid that in order to move forward.
So complicated, isn't it? Irregular warfare. Someone wants to know what if you would give us an opinion on Covfefe.
Definitely a calm. I've seen references to a tincture that can be made, like a heavy metal recovery tincture that can be made using the elemental ingredients that the letters in Covfefe would correspond to. I think that is fascinating in and of itself. I really do. But I think that there's more comms with Covfefe, and I tell you, that's not one that I've got much of an opinion on, simply because I haven't had the chance to research it. I've been overwhelmed with the just the level of comms he's giving us now.
Someone asked, do you think that it was a coincidence, or it was timed that the catastrophe in Turkey happened at the same time as the satanic ritual live at the Grammys?
There are no coincidences.
We're told that this plan is a military operation. Is the organization a shared responsibility one, or is it a traditional from the top down with Trump as CIC and therefore calling the shots with advice from his inner circle?
It is not traditional in that sense, and that relates back to the U.S. military plans for continuity of government and preservation of the republic, with 90% compromised or eliminated in wartime. This chain of command has never been seen before. What we're experiencing right now within the United States military at that very, very highest level is, and this is an original event. This has never happened before, and we are working. It's my understanding that this whole plan is working towards creating a history where we stay within the confines of the Constitution, but we sort of expound upon what it means to do that when we're protecting our own.
Do you think JFK Jr. has an active position right now? And if so, what would that position entail in your experience from deep dives?
I think, active position as far as actively connected to the Q movement, perhaps. I think it's more likely that Junior's information and his pedigree puts him in a position to be a liaison, if you will, between those deep areas of white hat intelligence and command and control and the people. He's almost certainly using disguises. I believe the man has likely been within the population at different points along the way between 2017 and 2020. I've seen incredibly compelling photographic analyses done on multiple different events, especially Trump events. And it's very clearly a bodysuit hiding something underneath, but there's tellaways that you just simply can't ignore. And it would make sense that this sort of an individual would be keeping a pulse on the spirit of the American people, because it was the death of his father that really catalyzed and traumatized the American people and took their innocence away in a way that really has never been seen again, even with 9/11. 9/11 was an absolute tragedy, but JFK shocked the consciousness of this nation in a way that it had never been shocked before. Well, not in the sense since the Civil War. So, regardless, I think that aligns him perfectly to be taking that pulse and keeping an eye on where the spirit for patriotism really is and reporting that back. And that would be an extremely useful role moving forward if he were to transition into an educational form. And I think that's the most likely path we see for him.
I know he likes disguises. He likes, many disguises, and, he has the exact voice from the old videos, like on Jay Leno of -48. It's the same voice. I've studied it. And then 107, why would he have that name, which is really 107, which is JFK Jr., right, Meryl, in Gematria? So, and, you know, even -48's disguise, you can tell it's a mask. It's just so obvious it's a mask. And so those are just some of my thoughts about his disguises. Do you think there's any of his disguises that are obvious that we've been interacting with on a regular basis?
I think that's extremely possible, simply because it's relatively easily done from a counterintelligence point of view and perspective to infiltrate a movement that is primarily built on trust, regardless of what that movement is peddling. That's an extreme possibility. Whether I can confirm that, I really can't, obviously, and probably wouldn't be able to. I don't think anybody would really be able to confirm that unless they themselves were to let something like that slip, and even then, you'd have to wonder. But regardless, I'm extremely compelled in my assessment that Junior is alive and well, and was very well aware of what was going to happen to him, and has been preparing to basically seek revenge for what happened to his father for a very long time.
In regard to that, is the churned rumor mill that's been out there that JFK actually didn't die until last January or last December, and Jackie last January? Is that more fiction than fact, or fact than fiction?
It's difficult to make an assessment either way. I have heard interesting stories, but not really seen much compelling evidence for this idea that he was shot from multiple different directions. The primary shot took off part of the skull, but did not actually kill the man, and that he was rushed into essentially military witness protection vis-a-vis a hospital, a doctor's office there in Dallas. There's really no way to corroborate that, and so I can't go around saying that that's true or not. But I will say that part of this awakening is discernment, and I try to keep the door open to all extreme possibilities. I've seen interesting photographic comparisons showing what appeared to be an elderly man in military attire, features very similar to what the former president would have had. Now, are they the same, or is it simply a genetic consistency that we're that we're seeing across different bloodlines? It's anybody's guess. Regardless, and I'd like to highlight, regardless of which one is true, the public right now will come to understand, I think, the cabal's role in controlling the American population and the populations of the world via assassination through the lens of the death of John F. Kennedy. So it would not do the narrative warfare any good to bring that truth, if that were true, to bring that truth out at this time, because it would derail what we have going on. Tucker Carlson recently did one of the most incredible broadcasts, I think, in mainstream media history, where the people who were alive and the individuals who were young and middle-aged, parents and things like that, when the assassination of Kennedy happened, they got closure for the first time in a half century. They learned that the CIA, in collusion with domestic actors within the United States government, carried out an assassination to regain some level of influence within the governmental structure. That was absolutely remarkable, and I think has done a lot more to awaken people than we really appreciate yet. I heard a 21-year-old talking about that just the other day. That particular class of individual is highly gaslit, and really a socialist, pseudo-communist lens on all of their academic things that they're intaking, certainly in schools and universities all around the United States. And they were discussing the idea that the Central Intelligence Agency was able to go in and oust a sitting president. And I didn't interject on the conversation. There was a couple of them at a table in a restaurant that I was in recently. And it was absolutely wonderful to hear, because it gave me the encouragement knowing that at some level, this plan is highly effective and is working very, very well.
Interesting.
Sometimes I wonder how much will be revealed to the public after, during the 10 days of disclosure, because if they found out that Biden was an actor and that at least one of the actors is controlled by the white hats, wouldn't they feel like they've been played and angry? You know, there's a lot of that goes on. That, do you think that they just won't tell them a lot of that? I mean, a lot of us know. And so then a lot of them won't know at the same time. That just seems confusing.
I think when Q references certain bits having to remain classified to preserve the consciousness of mankind, I think it's actually talking about some of these military operations that we're experiencing right now. You know, in answer to your question, I do think that some of it, you know, some level of the complexity of things is not going to be really officially reported on for a very long time. But, you know, sort of highlighting what you were saying about feeling played and things like that, I think the purpose of the military operation is to provide catalysts for unity in other areas of society as mankind that will bond us together in ways that, regardless of whether we believe there was a military operation going on or to what extent it was going on, it really won't matter. We'll have an understanding of who the enemy really is. We'll have an understanding of what has really happened on this world. A lot of people are likely to come around pretty quickly at that point to the idea that all of this has been a calculated effort to get mankind to awaken. But once you awaken, you have the perspective of what needed to be done and what really had to happen. And so there's a great deal of peace that comes with that. And I think all of us have experienced that at some point or another, and they will as well. But I think for the ones that are still asleep, the ones that are still sort of consuming that entertainment, pop media, mainstream news space to get their bent and their lens on the world, we're seeing events coming that are going to shake them out of that in a really large way. And it won't have anything to do with whether the military is in control or not. It will have to do with highlighting who the enemy of humanity is, and then allowing them to actually experience and witness for themselves what this enemy of humanity is doing.
Do you think that that the black hats are controlling one of the Biden actors at the same time that we're controlling another one?
I really don't have any evidence to suggest that to me at this time. No.
So it's all a white hat operation, you think?
I believe so. When it comes to the control of the resident in chief, yes. Now, that may not be true for other masked actors in this particular charade at different levels, especially that mid-level. But as far as key players, especially players that are important cogs for continuity of government, we would have to have control of that in some respect.
Now, our advisor said that you know, a lot of our people were angry with Biden because he plagiarized Trump in the MAGA speech. But in fact, he gave soft announcements of Nasara, and he did that under our direction.
That is fascinating. I didn't report on that because I didn't want to jump into that pool without having done some research. But as I listened to that address, that was absolutely one of the things that I heard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, immediately after the speech, within 3 hours, things were able to move forward because it was a valid public announcement.
Correct. Absolutely. And we're seeing these allusions happening in all of these different areas, right? We're seeing this happen in the business space. We're seeing this happen, extreme comps coming from Elon Musk regarding financial restructuring and freedom, things like that, and tying these things back together. They have lost control, and they lost control of the financial system a long time ago, but we are seeing that public loss rolling out. And as that process goes forward, whoever is left over will have no choice but to play their very last desperation cards. And that's really how we conclude this. We drive them to a point where they have no other option. And then once those options have been exhausted, we pick up the pieces, we dispense with the justice, and we move forward.
They have estimated that about 8% of the population would commit suicide when they find out the truth, that their entire lives have been a lie. And so what our group has been doing is getting prepared for that to save as many lives as we can. And we developed a website called callusforhelp.live. And Mark helped me with that. And so we're not, we saved 2 lives, 2 people from suicide within 4 hours of launching that. And it's not launched and on the scale that it will be after what we call the happy day. That is inevitable and right around the corner. Once we are funded, we will go very quickly with billboards and commercials and social media and everything you can imagine to try to save as many people's lives as possible.
That is absolutely fantastic. And we're going to see, I think we're going to see a lot of that coming out of the Patriot community, because this community is by far and away, and I've experienced that recently in spades. It is without question the most giving, most compassionate, most accepting community out there. Regardless of whether we agree on certain particular nuances about life, we all sort of have the same common understanding that we're free sovereign beings, we're living souls. And our job here is to improve the earth and to improve ourselves through interaction and change with one another. I think that is some of the most crucial work, because there's going to be a large segment of the population that will struggle with those ideations. I think 8% is probably conservative. I think it's probably closer to 12 to 13% of the population are going to have serious struggles with accepting just how much of their lives have been sort of worked against them for their suffering. And being able to pivot from that, grow from that, and create out of that a new world, a better way of life, and change our understandings long term, change the habits of how we live, change the habits of how we exchange value and what we assign ethic importance to, and restore moral culpability in certain sectors, because that is an important part of this human dynamic that we all have. That really is the key to all of this. And individuals that are in those low places can sometimes be really reactive, but sometimes with the proper guidance, they can be some of the most incredible forces for good once they haul themselves out of that. And those bridges that Patriots are making, like the ones you're just talking about, those will be some of the most important connections to be made, I think, going forward.
And then there's another large percentage that will lose their minds. They're just, their brains can't wrap around what just happened, And where's their foundation? There's no foundation for them. If they don't know God, they have nowhere to stand. The earth just fell out. The bottom just fell out of everything.
Correct. And that has unfortunately happened for a lot of Patriots since 2020. This has sort of been the most intense time emotionally that humankind has really ever lived as one singular event, one singular commonality between all of us. But I guess what I tell everyone that I discuss that with is that this has the potential, and I think it's being shown out to actually become the most uniting event ever to occur in mankind's history. And that maybe even right up there with the time of the Christ, because of how the unification of humanity was sort of weaponized against us through denomination throughout the ages. This event will cost them everything. What they have put humanity through will cost them everything. It will cost them their lives. It will cost them their posterity. It will cost them their place in history. They will never again affect this world. They have no lineage. Their line dies here. They have lost it all. And so it's fitting that in such an hour as this, we have such intense suffering, but we have a sort of a focus of mission that has never been before. And there is a spiritual fire that has come alive in the Patriot community all around the world, in all nationalities and languages, that has simply stood up and said, this is it. We're done. Never again. We will not tolerate this anymore. And that's how we move forward. We try to encourage one another through the suffering, right? And that's really what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. One of our members is asking, do you have an opinion about what the shot heard around the world will be?
Poetry would lead me to believe something to do with these kill shots. I can't really confirm that because Q is also famous for thinking outside of the box in ways that none of us really considered. Shot heard around the world could mean a lot of things. I would encourage Anons to just pay close attention and do some digging, some cross-referencing, and see if you can figure it out. I would start with the drop.
And many of our members are asking about the Brunson case being scheduled for the 17th and the significance of that.
You know, it's worth highlighting that the Brunson case is happening at the behest of this military operation at the very top. But I think it's extremely significant, and I think it's going to go somewhere. You know, my initial intel and a piece of paper that I had read back in early January suggested to me that it was going to be a 5-4 decision in our favor. So we could still see something like that. Now I've since retracted that, and the email itself that I saw, I'm no longer satisfied that it wasn't altered in some fashion. However, this is happening on the 17th of the month, in the month where the first day of the month is Freedom Day, and the Gematria for the 17th of February 2023, the simple Gematria for that date is 17. So, you know, I think something has to come of this. We've seen a highlight of the national security risks in an enormous fashion. That's been the primary focus of the narrative attention over the last 4 to 6 weeks, has been national security. And that is one of the things that is at the core of the contention that the Brunson brothers have made. National security for the United States of America has been completely eviscerated. It's not just been compromised, it's been blown wide open. We literally blew the door off of the hinges and invited everything evil and controlling and foreign, if you will, into our space. And that's the case that's being made in their petition. So I think we need to watch this. The Q tells us it has to go through the courts and it has to carry weight. It would make sense that the Supreme Court of the United States would be the court to sort of evict a Manchurian government at the behest of a military operation, and how we see that tie into the restoration, the reconstitution of what is rightful. That process could be done in potentially weeks, or it could be done in months. There would have to be an interim faculty managing things in the middle, and I think that faculty would be, the rightful choice would be the United States military, who has, by the way, been doing that already anyway. And is really a reason that we're able to still have these sorts of calls, and why society hasn't broken down, at least here in the United States. So I think we need to watch this case. This is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, we were told by our advisor months ago that they did overturn the election, that it's already won, and what you said is correct. So, you know, we're just waiting for it to come out. You know how the Roe versus Wade situation, they decided that a long time before they came out with it. And it's the same with this one. So. All right. And then there are people who would like to know about Super Bowl Sunday, the 12th. It says there was something that went out on the web. An event of great significance and transformative power will occur. This event has been prophesied by the ancients and will mark a turning point in human history. It will shake the foundations of the Illuminati's power and bring an end to their rule once and for all. This event will not be easily missed, as its impact will be felt around the world, and its effects will be profound and long-lasting, whether it manifests as a natural disaster, a technological breakthrough, or a mass awakening. It still is to be seen, but what is clear is that it will change the course of human history forever. I don't know if you saw that or what you think about it.
You know, I think that what that is describing, that something like that has to come to compel us into the next age and really compel humanity into a fully awakened state. I think false flag is probably on the list for that, and probably the largest false flag we've ever seen as mankind. Now, what form that takes, Q references some movies that are very interesting. The Sum of All Fears, which has a nuclear scare event simultaneously at multiple NFL stadiums all around the United States. We've seen the narrative space talking about dirty bombs in this Ukrainian war now for a long time. So, you know, how we proceed forward, it could be any of that. It could be all of that. It could be that and more. Whatever happens is going to get the attention of mankind all very suddenly on some singular events. And with the power created in the narrative space with the digital army, those events will not be able to hide behind some sort of smokescreen or shadow anymore. We will be able to show mankind in real time what's actually happening and what's really occurring. And being able to do that sort of opens up a conduit to limitless potential from that point forward. If all of us were on board right from the beginning, this entire continuity of government process would have probably taken about a 12-month period. But because we have to get all of humanity to come around at the same time that we're handling very sensitive operations, which are still ongoing, rescuing of children and things like that, still ongoing. You know, I think we're doing the very best that we can, but there is going to have to come a convergence point where we sort of leapfrog to the next phase.
Well, we don't want to keep you too much longer, but can you discuss the DoD directive, the document that was just found, and linking of that to the removal of Biden?
I'm sorry, I've not seen this document, but if you will send it over to me, I'd be happy to have a look at it. That does not surprise me. I mean, this is a military operation right from the start, right? And so military law and civilian law have both been applied in key areas. And the military put all of the paperwork between I should say the military and the Trump administration put all of the paperwork sort of into place, the framework and the scaffolding, if you will, to go about this process and set us up for some domino effects. And that sounds like that's something that's going to be used in that process.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been lovely. It's been so informative. We are so grateful to you. And I would like to end with a prophetic message that God gave me for you today.
Thank you. I'm honored.
So he said that you are a prophetic mystic with the gift of wisdom. You're a deep thinker, a spiritual seeker. God handpicked you and trained you all your life without you even knowing it. You never felt like you fit in well into society, and that was for a reason, because you were singled out for a very high calling that even the patriarchs longed to look into. They saw our day and are watching with breathless anticipation of how we will fulfill the parts that we play. You have a brilliant mind like President Trump. You've always thought outside the box before anyone knew there was a box, and that box we now know as the Matrix. You saw it earlier than most people, and you became a bulldog against its system of injustice. You were frustrated for a long time because no one would listen to you. No one understood what you had to say, but you were reserved for a specific time frame. You were born for this day, this specific time in history, to resurrect the hopes and dreams of an entire nation. That's how we see you, and even the world. Even the sound of your voice, God uses to bring peace to people. You are a real live tomb raider. You dig for buried secrets of the evil ones, and you dig for the lost gold in the robbed destinies of the people of the real world. You know we're all actors in this epic movie, but I believe that this is who you personify in this movie. You are Aragorn in leadership. You're Frodo in purity and humility, and you're Legolas in spiritual perception. You come off as Clark Kent, all humble and polite, but we know who you really are. You're Captain America. You were chosen by God to come on the scene at this point in time because of the weariness of the people. You were trusted by God because of the pureness of your heart and the sharpness of your spiritual sight. You have an enlarged heart of love and compassion. You've always given more and loved deeper than most people. And we in our group of superhero seekers understand you because we have hearts like you. So I will tell you what I tell my followers. You cannot give out of an empty cup. you must not give out of a half full cup or even a full cup. You must give out of an overflowing cup if you're going to have longevity for your part in this war. And so you must recharge yourself to the extent that you give out. So we would like to contribute to the recharge of your life and calling with a love offering. It's not as big as we would like it to be, but in order to fulfill the mission and purpose of this gift, it must be utilized solely to strengthen you and your family. And I say it that way because I know that if we don't earmark this gift, there is a very good chance you're going to give it away. But God wants you to use it to remind you of how he feels about you and how valuable you are to him and to us. And he is saying, well done, my son.
Wow.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
You're welcome back anytime. You are our favorite.
Well, thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful evening. And thank you for that blessing.
All right. Bless you. And your family.
Keep in mind, the end of the year is go time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yes, it is. 1, 2, 3, go.
All right.
A
Good
pleasure.
night.
Folks.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Mark and Meryl, and happy birthday to Meryl.
Sure.
Any closing thoughts?
I think that was great.
That was fun.
Thank you for everything, Tress.
You're
You're
welcome.
an amazing woman.
Thank you. I'm not sure if everybody caught what you guys just said. You gave the gematria on SG Anon, right? Is that what you just did?
No,
I figured out this was the first time. They say when we're kids, 1, 2, 3, go. The end of the year is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
12, 31, 23.
Oh,
Go time. I thought about that the other night.
yeah. All right. So let me give you, thank you, Javada, for asking, because I didn't even think about telling you how to give. You can, let me, if you have Zelle Pay, that's the best way, because PayPal is taking a huge cut now. So if you give Zelle Pay and use my name, make sure you spell it right. And then you can use my email address with that, hope@someonebelievesin.you.org. So there's one way. Then you can also give through PayPal with the same information, but earmark it for family and friends so we don't lose a percentage. All right. So we've already raised $500 in advance. As soon as he posted that he fell on the ice and he hurt vertebrae that was already severely damaged in a car accident. He couldn't even walk after that car accident. And he used prayer and meditation in the spirit to resurrect his ability to walk. All right. Then he fell on those same vertebrae. And what I found out from Steve Schultz is that none of the Patriot speakers, the truthers, the intel providers, none of them get an honorarium when they speak. And I started to sob because they give tirelessly. They have families, they have jobs, full-time jobs. And here they are laying down their lives to keep us, our hopes up and keep us informed. And they don't get a dime. It's an unwritten, I believe, understanding among the truthers that they don't want to make money off the people, off giving the truth out. And it broke my heart. And then when he said that they had to choose between electricity to pay their electricity bill and gasoline, it just broke my heart. And so I determined that I was going to do something about it. And so I alerted Steve Schultz, and I thought we'll get the Facebookers and the Trekkers on Choice Social together to do something about it, because I know you all have big hearts like he does. And so let's do our best to bless him as big as we can, and don't feel like a small gift, it doesn't matter, because it does. When we put that all together, we can make a difference. All right. All right. Thank you so much. You can always email me if you have any questions about the giving part. It's through our ministry, Someone Believes in You, since we're a 501c3. And so as soon, I'm going to wait a couple days for the replay to happen in order to get it sent to him. But I think he was blessed tonight. I appreciate all the questions that came in. I felt like it was meaty. That I was very happy with the questions, and Mark and Meryl's input, that was perfect. And probably, not many people bless him back spiritually. So this was a great privilege tonight to have you all present and be able to have him on our show. So, all right, bless you all. I'll get this recording out. I'll put it on Facebook and Choice Social. And I just invite everybody on Facebook to join us. We have an awesome time we do it twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. And we have a very close-knit family, and family is where it's at this time in history. And we give continual intel, because I have a very high source as well. And so we serve out spiritual munchies, intel munchies, health, health munchies, whatever, all kinds of things to help everybody. Every aspect of life is what we cover. So I will put the link to join our group on Facebook. And so, all right, bless you all. I love you, and we will see you soon. All righty. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night.